jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show.
Join us as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Listener discretion is advised. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. It's a jacked up review show. Jacked up review show.
I had seen Bride of Chucky when it first hit video because a friend really wanted to see it, but it's not him or anything. And,
Yeah. So
I've seen a little bit of Seed of Chucky on TV, couldn't sit through it.
So tackling up for a mini episode, My Horrific Lives, Erica Wright and I are doing a two-parter of Child's Play franchise.
Thanks for having me on the show.
Thank you for being here. And so long story short, Child's Play is just one of those, much like Leprechaun, the people who I thought would like it don't like it, and vice versa. The people who shouldn't like it really, really like it. Either because it was like one of the first freaky movies they saw as a kid, or they just like a mix of just outrageous batshit comedy and Brad Dourif's performance, and you and I have both encountered him at conventions. Nicest soul ever, makes anything worth watching.
Super nice.
I actually recently got the uncut Blu-ray of Death Machine recently,
Oh, that's neat.
because I'm told that's way better, because you look at the old-fashioned Lionsgate release and
Yeah,
it
I
felt
remember
so
that.
incomplete.
Yeah, that original one was not very good.
Yeah, and I mean, I was watching it for free on Sci-Fi Channel one day, and I was just like, something's wrong when you're watching it for free and it feels like you got your time taken away.
Yeah, all right.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try
They must be destroyed on sight.
the new Podcast Cure-All? Sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of
They must be destroyed on sight.
as needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Hey, I heard you like movies.
I heard you like to hustle.
I heard you like podcasts.
Well, guess what?
There's a podcast for you out there called The Home Video Hustle.
Damn right.
Every Friday, we talk about whatever movie PJ picks out the bag. What does that mean? Every Wednesday on our YouTube page, I put a bunch of movies in a bag, and PJ picks one out at random. And then we just watch it. We talk about it for maybe like an hour, hour and a half, 2 hours, whatever we feel like doing, wherever the conversation leads us.
But do we actually talk about the movie?
Most of the time.
Ah.
Tangents galore.
Yes.
So believe me, we may be a movie podcast, but it's not always about movies. We might talk about video games,
Music.
Yeah, that's the big one, music. Sometimes we might get a little bit of politicalness in there.
Yes.
Sometimes we may just, we know what we like to do. We like to tell stories, PJ.
Ah, yes.
I am the master storyteller
Yes.
of the podcast realm. Undefeated. So if you like to hear about movies, video games, whatever foolishness comes to our mind, the most random stuff you could think of, check out the Home Video Hustle. You can find us on the Stitchers,
Yes.
the Google Play,
Yes.
Apple Podcasts,
What else?
Podbean,
What else?
Podcast Addict,
Goddamn.
all that. Ain't no reason you can't get your hustle on. We everywhere, worldwide, baby.
Hustle, motherfucking hustle.
Hey, we can't cuss in the promo, PJ.
Ah.
We gotta be family friendly. There may be podcasts out there that don't want his hair to say
Ah. Ah.
all
Yeah.
that good fun stuff.
Well, you.
Yeah. don't run the listeners away, PJ.
Ah, I'm sorry.
But this is going kind of long.
Yes.
So we'll end this and say, hey, check out the Home Video Hustle every Friday on all the various podcast outlets. Peace.
Peace.
As far back as I can remember, I always wanted to be a gangster. And while Witch didn't make it to the top of the world, he did make the Gangs of Hollywood podcast. So join the gang and enjoy a movie review podcast about movie gangs, gangsters, mobsters, and the mayhem they cause. You can find GOH Podcast on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at GOH Pod at www.gohpod.com, as well as your favorite podcast listening app. And remember, say hello to your little friend for me.
If you take two old punk rockers who are past their prime, put them in front of a movie screen, and give them a podcast, what do you get? Cinema Punks. Cinepunks. It's the mixtape of movies.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of her.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little
popping
history
up.
doll popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was
How
going to be
could
a
you
rough
watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our cue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Ba-da, 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 ba-da. Ba-da, 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 ba-da. Meow. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. With a one-liner plot holes and gratuitous movies. It's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zamenhof. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zamenhof, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zamenhof, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zamenhof.
Hi everybody, it's Mac Jackson. I wanted to invite you to a new site called the Forever Adventure Network. This website has everything. Pictures, videos, blogs. There's original music by Harmony Constant, 2 podcasts. One is the MacGyver podcast, where we celebrate Richard Dean Anderson, his iconic roles, and how it's influenced our lives. There's episode discussions, interviews, and life conversations. The second podcast is the Never Gets Old podcast, where we celebrate all the best things that we love in life, from TV, movies, music, and comics. The site is also the home for the MacGyver SG-1 audio series, an ongoing adventure series that continues the adventures of MacGyver and SG-1. There are also multiple stores to choose from for all of your pop culture and adventure needs. Come on by and check us out today. And thanks for joining the adventure.
Are you sick of the same old stale podcasts? Well, then join Vanessa and Darren as they dissect movies of all kinds. The 2 lifelong cinema lovers bring their favorites, curiosities, and first-time watches to the operating table and inject them with a healthy dose of snark. Then there's the waiting room, where they examine books and short stories. So just look for them on Apple Podcasts and where fine podcasts are available. They're part of the Legion Podcast Network. Follow them on Twitter at VDClinicPod. Join them on Facebook at facebook.com/groups/VDClinicPod. Or email them at vdclinicpod@gmail.com. They're ready to cure what ails you. And still, they just might be a little contagious.
We now continue with our program.
You feel like you should like this when the characters are all named after famous genre directors and
Yeah, but it's just like, such a drag, right? And that might be worth revisiting if there's like an uncut version that.
That's what it is so far. It's kind of the Johnny Mnemonic thing where you had to get it through German region-free Blu-ray.
Nice. Yeah,
So
too.
For sure. So Child's Play, this is another one I'm actually surprised wasn't part of Full Moon Entertainment or produced by Sam Raimi. It just had that kind of, or even part of Gremlins, you know what I mean? Where it's kind of, there's some fighting, there's some scares, and then there's just some other just outrageous over-the-top acting. So it's like, it pretty much has that down to a T, and yet something wasn't quite gelling with this. But before we disappoint lovers of this, we'll let you know there are some good reviews in this, and there's going to be some other not so kind reviews. But so strap in.
Bite the pillow.
I guarantee you, we're going to be fair. We're not going to rant. So, what was your introduction to this crazy franchise? I would always see parts of this on one of the Fox channels, and again, there was just too many commercials and dead space, so I would never see any of them all the way through.
Right. So, I think my first introduction actually probably was, unfortunately, Bride of Chucky.
So part 4.
Yeah, I had seen the earlier films, but a friend of mine, had this perverse glee of, like, he deliberately sought out the dumbest, lowest, horror movies possible. He just got this glee from it. So, he picked the movie one of the nights we were hanging out. That's the movie he picked. So it was like right after it went to video, we were watching that. I was just like, oh man, this is so painful. But yeah, so I was unfortunately kind of judging that whole franchise based on that entry.
Mm-hmm.
And then a few years later, I saw part of Seed of Chucky on TV and thought it was incredibly stupid and couldn't sit through the whole thing.
Yeah, I remember when the Dallas Morning News gave that a C-. They were surprisingly gentle. They usually would bash a lot of just very pretentious blockbuster movies unless they were just very intelligent, like Romero types. And
right, yeah. So I don't know. Last year I saw the original Child's Play on TV and thought, wow, this is like actually pretty good.
Same. And it didn't help that the movie channels started playing the remake, and
oh yeah,
but for whatever reason, oh yeah, but what's weird is they would say 1988. I'm like, this is from 2019.
Oh no, that's like good. Yeah, I did see the remake in the theater, and yeah, maybe I'm getting ahead of myself. I thought it was decent. It's barely a remake though, because they have the doll, but the whole storyline's significantly different, we'll say. But we can get to that later.
For sure. So yeah, this is Tom Holland, later did Thinner and then also did Fright Night. I think he's definitely, after hearing his recent interview from a few years ago on Podcasting After Dark, it seems like he definitely was one of those, he just gave his all to every category. He just made sure the actors are giving the appropriate remarks, doing a lot of suspense, and leaving the blood, for like the final segment,
Right, yeah.
And much like Gremlins, this does kind of hit on just even RoboCop. It's a very anti-commercialism movie throughout this whole franchise.
It is, yeah. I think the biggest anti-commercial part that I remember, at least of the ones I've seen, because I haven't watched the whole franchise at this point, but in part 3, that corporate CEO from the toy companies talking about children are just trainee consumers, or he says something like that. It's this very deeply cynical moment, and
Yeah.
that he like doesn't care what the impact of selling a product is, as long as it's all about the bottom line. It's about making money. He doesn't care if it hurts other people. So I thought that was like a really good moment that I wish that film had explored more than it did.
Oh, easily rivaled Joe Dante and especially Raimi. All these other guys just blurt stuff out and yet doing it so comfortably as opposed to feeling forced and not natural. And it's, I think this movie, what it really is perfect is if you can get the rare soundtrack, it's just has a very well constructed melody that has the right kind of melody yet intrigue to it.
Right. With the first film, I mean, it was cool seeing Chris Sarandon's in the first film as the police detective.
He does give it not necessarily a crime element, but like you say, it's just so cool seeing him say, I'm willing to risk my job because no one believes that, this killer has come back. I saw it with my own eyes, the electricity.
Yeah.
Struck by lightning.
And also, I love Fright Night, so it's like, hey. So
I'm due for a rewatch of that, but yeah, those could easily exist in the same universe if you think about it.
Yeah, they could. With that first film, I think probably my favorite moment is for quite a while, like you don't see the doll doing evil shit, right? It's like, and he's saying, oh, Chucky did this, he's alive, he talked to me, told me whatever. And of course no one's going to believe a kid. So I think the best reveal is when the mom realizes the doll doesn't have batteries. And
Absolutely.
she says, threatens him, if you don't talk to me, I'm going to throw you in the fire. And that's when he comes alive and you see these very human facial expressions. He's like, you fucking bitch, or you slut, or whatever it was he says to him. So then you hear like Brad Dourif's voice and you see the evil expression on the doll face. Like that's like the best moment in the first film for me. It's just that revealed. It's like, oh yeah, this is this is the serial killer inside the doll.
And somehow Don Mancini, who's always in a rarity, has been with the whole franchise. Usually someone takes off or they say, I don't like that version of the character anymore, or there's a different opportunity. He's stuck with this the whole way, but basically his points definitely are really only nail it here, I think, because they, Catherine Hicks, always a good actress, been on every family show I can think of, and to see her in a rare horror appearance was pretty cool. They could have easily gotten Dee Wallace Stone.
True.
With her, and there's just always kind of a around the corner kind of momentum. And I think that's really just does it absolute favors because it, when you're not listening to the dread-induced music, you're also, treated to a car chase. You're also, again, you just got all the sense of people knowing something's not right, but they're all looking like crazy people. But it's done in a very, I cannot fucking speak tonight, but it is.
I know what you mean.
It's a barricaded. It's held down. They are just as much hostages as the audience is, and never for once does anyone do something like wait for the body to stop moving or even leave the kid alone with the doll. The minute they see that doll acting up, they try and get it out of there. And again, Chucky keeps coming back to life because he's very much like Maniac Cop, which came out later. And by the third installment, they also established that it's kind of a voodoo ritual as well. So
yeah, that's interesting. Though I mean, I have friends who are initiates in voodoo, and
really
another friend who's raised in Louisiana voodoo. So you don't want to mix those terms up necessarily. Voodoo is kind of a rude term if you're talking about, for instance, Haitian,
shit
practice.
Okay.
But yeah, Hollywood, I mean, I guess I'm not surprised. Of course, a Hollywood script would completely fuck it up, but they have such a superficial understanding of anything with that, but I could totally see like someone who's initiated in that or practice it their whole life, they're probably going to find it really stupid and insulting. So, but I don't think you can't really take any of these movies seriously. It's like you're talking about a serial killer inside of a toy. So
yeah, by the third act, the first movie is kind of running out of steam, and you're just running, but it still has your attention because you like everything that's reasonably happened before.
Right. And this is another one of those movies. In many cases, I don't know what's with me. So we just talked about the Trancers films. I like the second one the best. For Witchmaster, I like the second one the best. I like the second one the best.
All good. Part one, I would have never suspected it would have led to many sequels because it was very low budget, for that time. It was $9 million and it made $44 million back.
Yeah, right.
And you didn't know what to expect, but the surprises paid off. It was a very delightful kind of Friday movie, kind of like the first Predator, I guess you could say, for lack of better.
Exactly.
It was an old 40s style B picture with bigger production values and interesting, like you say, just the villain, not the title villain, but the villain himself was just a scene still. And see both sides of him as both the, homicidal killer. And then in doll form, that was a cool testament that really hadn't been done too much.
Yeah, and I do like how they, especially since this was done before CGI, they give the doll very human facial expressions and mannerisms. And, fits in perfectly with Brad Dourif's voiceover. So, I mean, that's like a cool thing with that series, too. Like, now I think they would just CGI all of that stuff.
Yeah, and they could have gone even more kooky. They could have had a psychic in there. They could have had, some other kind of supernatural wizard, but they didn't. And
right, yeah.
I think this thing should have gotten nuttier. I think that just would have been better, but instead they just said, no, let's just have far more dolls.
Right.
Which again, I'm surprised this is not part of Puppetmaster, although that's more lowbrow.
Yeah, for sure. So what did you think of the second film? Did you think it was as good as the first one, or
first one I actually saw all the way. I'll put it this way: I would have never expected the kid to be the same kid from part one, because he's just so dull. This has its moments, especially with Gary Graham as the abusive stepdad, and who you root for his comeuppance.
Oh yeah.
But I think you could say there's some memorable kills. I guess.
Yeah, I was gonna say there were creative kills in the second one.
I guess it's just getting there. I just don't really care about anything. So I mean, you're gonna watch these anyway because they're so kooky. But I don't know. This is very hard to recommend for me. But then again, I have not seen all the other ones, so I don't know how worse it can get. So
it can get a lot worse. But okay, I can't speak to what Cult of Chucky was one of the newer ones. I comment on that. So
I was like, there's a CGI puppet. Nah, pass.
Oh, and CGI disappoints me. So so I did watch the third one to prepare for this episode because I didn't want to be totally clueless about
oh good
part of the franchise. But
I feel like it could have just remained a trilogy, and then they could have just done what they did with Ready Player One, where they just have Chucky cameo in a movie.
Yeah, I think that would have been okay, and I think it would have been stronger if they had quit after the third one. So the third one was still decent. I didn't like it quite as much as the first two, but it was okay. It had some good ideas.
Yeah, the third one is definitely one of those where you got this, mentally impaired kid, you got an army base being ambushed, and it was always the one that was on TV the most because other than literally a few brief scenes, it's really not all that violent or foul-mouthed. So I kid you not, this was almost always every weekend on like one of those UPN or Spanish channels. It's just they love playing the third part, and
That's funny.
I think it was interesting because, you know, years after, you know, it starts becoming so common in pop culture, you know, shows like Robot Chicken and other stuff would parody it. Other cartoons would always have at least one killer doll.
Yeah.
Whose line is it anyway? I kid you not. Wayne Brady, in one of my favorite episodes, would what they were doing the party, not the Party Quirks game. They were doing like the Let's Make a Date, where you guess who your creepy date is, and he did a dead-on guy turning into Chucky, and it was hysterical how he made his voice. It was like a distorted Cookie Monster.
That's funny. I haven't seen that, but
Oh yeah.
definitely, yeah. Chucky's definitely a pop culture icon. It's just how the movies are so like, even the better ones. They're fun movies, but they're very silly, and I can't
Yeah.
really, seriously, I'm not scared by them, but I'm fascinated by the fact that there have been several murderers and serial killers who really love these movies.
Oh really? Oh jeez.
And
So someone has
some of
seen.
these cases are really disturbing. So if you just do a Google search on, you know, true
Oh,
crime,
that's right.
you know, child play movies, and like, yeah, one woman was like a Russian serial killer. She was nicknamed the Bride of Chucky. She had a Chucky tattoo on her shoulder.
Oh, Jesus.
It's like her favorite franchise, and she was really into torturing people. She killed multiple people. So I mean,
Wasn't there someone in Canada and yeah, I do seem to vaguely recall there was a UK serial killer, but yeah, wasn't there also a Canadian one?
Maybe, I don't know, but there were at least like at least 5, you know, murderers who really enjoyed this franchise for whatever reason. And if I were a serial killer, this is not where I would be getting inspiration. But
Because I mean, you see the knife featured a lot on the cover, but the knife isn't even. This isn't even the most of the graphic kinds of movies. This is not Saw level. This is more,
exactly. It's so I mean I wonder what they found, you know, inspiring, quote unquote. I have no idea, but it's a little odd.
maybe because it was just like the first person who kind of talked like an actual killer, like, you like that bitch, I'm gonna kill you. So
Maybe. Well, yeah, in some of these cases, like this one UK case, it was, I think, a teenage girl who was tortured to death and set on fire. It was like a horrible, heartbreaking case, but she lived long enough to tell detectives what happened, and one of the people who tortured her were quoting lines from, you know, Chucky. So
I mean, it is a readily available movie, so that
it is.
It might have been it. So we can't say that Silence of the Lambs or, you know, Joker caused violence as much as this movie.
Well, no, I don't think any movie causes violence. I just
It's
kind of
just
wonder,
stupid
of
people.
all the violent movies out there, why have some people really fixated on this franchise?
Well,
like, that's like it's an odd choice.
At the end of the day, this is kind of like video games. They've always tried to connect the dots, and each time it's been basically a straw man argument. And it's very much, I just go back to Taxi Driver. The guy who decided to go and shoot Ronald Reagan had seen that, you know, movie endless times. He wanted to do that, and he was already loopy, and he just needed inspiration.
Right.
Which is funny because that movie doesn't even, you know, go over there all the way.
In forensic science, or, you know, forensic behavioral science, they call that collateral material. So it's not saying that media causes stuff, but everyone likes things that reflect their interests or reflect their hobbies. So if you are already interested in killing people or torturing people, you will want to surround yourself with media that supports that interest. But fascinatingly, horror films, according to investigators I spoke with, and some of them had worked literally thousands of violent cases, they said that actually horror films only show up about 1 in every 5,000 cases. They're really not that big as collateral material.
They're not even likely to watch something like Hostel. They're more likely to just watch something just that has people getting shot up or play video games. Like
action movies are more common. even benign, softcore porn like Playboy's really common. If it's a child sexual abuse case, Star Trek weirdly is super common.
Because that's where it is.
movies,
Often they've been abused, so they just need something that's pretty common to their messed up lives. So it's
but horror movies, like the media tends to blame those more than other things. But
they haven't actually watched it.
All that. So anyway, I just thought that's a total tangent, but I found.
Well, no, it's true. A lot of more often than not, people will complain about something without actually seeing it, and they're just going on the trailer or
exactly. Or whatever reputation. And it's like, well, if you actually watch this yourself, it's overhyped most of the time. It's
for instance, if you'd only seen the trailer for lack of a better example, Piranha, and not the actual satirical Jaws parody that is the movie, you would suspect it's just nothing but people drowning in blood and guts. But it's like, it really is just making fun of just, again, evil corporations and other B-movie tropes. And these movies, fortunately, even with their violence, they're not all that graphic. In fact, the most graphic they get is when Chucky is actually, disintegrating and all that.
Yeah.
And you let it slide because it's an evil doll, and he's not decapitating Ken dolls or other stuff or anything else. No animals or kids are getting killed. It's all just... I think people have clinged on to it because, again, they either saw it as kids or teenagers or young adults, or it was just, again, it's just commonly on the TV channels and easy for everyone to see without getting that easily offended, I think. So I think that's...
Right. I do like the concept of Chucky becomes more human the longer he's inside the doll, so he starts bleeding. So when they finally destroy him at the end of these movies or melt him, there's all this blood, running out and or exploding, which is it's a cool effect, and it's a little surprising when it comes out of a plastic doll. But
yeah, third one I feel could have really worked, but it just took its sweet ass time getting there. And they start off, I think the movie makes a big mistake of just feeling very redundant by just again showing the amoral, unethical, toy company doing just the billionth board meeting. And it's just like, there's really no point in doing this unless something has changed the narrative. But since the narrative's not going to change and Chucky's once again back here on a killing spree, somehow...
I wish they had that more with that, showing the toy company's actions and maybe make that CEO more of a bad guy in this, but they kill him very early in the film.
And how his spirit has even survived inside this other doll, I don't recall it being explained.
Right. And that doesn't make a ton of sense. So I know they melt the previous doll down and they make a new batch of dolls, but it's like, okay,
T2
why is
style.
Chucky just in this one doll? Why
Right.
is he not dispersed over maybe multiple dolls? Like, that could have been interesting.
Yeah, and kind of like parts of part 2, just the animatronics aren't the least bit frightening.
Yeah.
Just in their close-up. And from a long view, they have a good use of camera and lighting and, dread music, but it's like occasionally they'll do a close-up of him and I'm like, is this supposed to be freaky? I mean, because they're kind of hinting on him that they want you to be freaked out because the music's indicating that, and it's just like, this is just silly, because that's all he's gonna do is just joke around. So
right, it's true. So did you sit through any of the later sequels?
I saw parts of part 4, and it was one of those where I couldn't tell you anything about it, even if I were to rewatch it. It was just, I just remember Jennifer Tilly, is now...
I like Jennifer Tilly, yeah.
I like her, and I just know she becomes like a recurring character from this point on. It's like, Chucky, we gotta give him a girlfriend.
Yeah, and I think, isn't she also in Seed of Chucky as well?
Yeah. And
that one, I couldn't sit through that whole thing. That was painful, and I haven't seen Call of... so there's also Curse of Chucky and Cult of Chucky. So does that make 7? That makes 7 of the original franchise, not counting the remake.
Mm-hmm. And that's not a bad run for any kind of movie, but at the same time, I think it's one of those. It was originally by MGM, but it got sold to Universal, and it was just one of those you never really knew when it was coming out because it just always came out at just unexpected times. I will give them credit for not just attaching numbers to it and actually try and just add a different title to it. But like you say, it is one of those, it just kind of becomes monotone for such a, because again, we like ourselves some Gremlins, Wishmaster type fun. This should be kind of more on par for that course, and yet it just kind of. I will say this: I've listened to the soundtrack a few different times because, long story short, one of my favorite film composers, Graham Revell, released this as on a CD case along with his score for Pitch Black.
Okay.
It was a very expensive soundtrack, and it's a collector's item, so I paid probably $50 out the ass just to get it.
Wow, nice.
It was so worth it. It was
cool.
I forget the name of the site, but it's one of those you'll find better prices there than Amazon's 200 plus collector's items or eBay's unusual figures sometimes. And it was one of those, I can't remember the name of it, but it was a fun soundtrack, seller site. And it was very interesting seeing how, Graham Revell can do a good horror score if he really wants to. And this one, I felt like he's just too busy, was just reusing cues from other movies he was scoring around the same time. And I didn't have the visual in my head, but usually a good score shines through regardless of whether or not I've seen the movie. And it just kind of became, the score started off pretty good and then kind of became formulaic after a while. So, and I think it's just because I know part 4, Bride of Chucky was on USA and Sci-Fi all the time. It was a big thing, and I don't think it made its money back.
Right.
But yet they tried again with Seed, and I remember everyone in high school had seen that and was just talking about it endlessly, and it seemed like everybody thought it was less trashy, but still just too stupid for its own good. So, because it's like he has a kid or something, and he's voiced by Billy Boyd of Lord of the Rings fame, and I'm just like, okay.
I don't remember a lot of it, but I remember the child is genderless, so it's Glenn/Glenda. Haha, Glenn and Glenda reference.
But don't. Yeah. Anyone who hasn't seen the LGBT friendly ? Edwin film.
Yeah, question mark. Is it friendly?
I mean, it's well intended, but it's technically offensive by today's standards.
Right,
So
yeah, it's one of those things like maybe at the time it was very cutting edge, but now it's like, well, that's kind of cringy.
If it makes you feel any better, Trace Bayou, that's right, Dr. Forrester and Frank Conniff of, TV's Frank, of Mystery Science Theater had their own 2-man show, and they constantly would, for 1 year, they were riffing 2 movies. It would always be, they would come to whatever town, and, it was like, I can't remember the days, but it would be like one night we're doing Glenn or Glenda, and the next night they would do The Tingler with Vincent Price.
Yeah.
I could only make one of those days, but I regretted not being able to see Glenn and Glenda. But I saw the Tingler one. I was like, these guys are awesome because they're actually in the audience chamber reacting to you and at the movie.
Right.
And they were very lovely people, and I recommend them to all B-movie addicts and, of course, fans of Mystery Science Theater.
Oh, nice.
Tracks. But yeah, there's definitely some other, I think, like Leprechaun, these are just so damn campy, they're really not worth losing sleep over. And at the same time, I don't really find them as overdone as Leprechaun, if that makes sense. Because Leprechaun kept going and going and going, and part of its charm was kind of being aware of how bad it was, and at the same time having a lot of fun with its stupidity.
True.
It was another blurry line between good versus bad versus entertaining versus so bad it's good.
Yeah.
Just like every other 90s franchise. So this one is just very hard to pin down because I have seen people who literally ignite over this. They love it to death. I have seen even the biggest nitpickers, who for whatever reason are fine with these movies, flaws and all. And then of course I've seen others who are like, "Oh, why would you let your kids see that? Why would you let anyone watch that? That's just."
Blind people shouldn't watch this. Oh man. I don't hate all of the movies, but some of them were very difficult, and I haven't even seen the newer ones, excluding the remake. So,
from what bits of it I saw, they're a totally different tone. But I feel like they shouldn't have even been that serious, and yet they're kind of trying to capture kind of the better moments of part one, and at the same time, I've seen people say they legit got freaked out by those. I don't understand how you could be freaked out by these, but okay.
Yeah, I didn't find them scary at all. If I had seen them as a kid, I probably would have been scared, but I'm very sensitized to a lot of things now, so...
I saw all kinds of movies.
With some of them, but...
for the most part, I was always the kind of guy who would get shocked at how gory something was getting eventually. So I was kind of the X-Files kind of guy, you know. I was like, I love special effects. I love how they either are the best part of a movie or actually serve a narrative, as long as they're fun escapism. And so these movies, I mean, I can't see anyone getting freaked out by them other than just being like, well, you know. Now, they're definitely like many movies I encounter where 1 minute you're turning the volume up because the characters are mumbling, and then the music starts getting all shrilly and over the top, so then you turn the volume back down, so that gets annoying.
Yeah, that is annoying.
I call it the Mulder mumble exposition, and then wee. Yeah. It is, well, better yet, what is your favorite moment out of all these movies, and what is your least favorite moment?
Oh gosh, I haven't seen all of the movies, so
let's stick with the trilogy.
Thing, but,
or let's stick with the first
three, because they're the ones I've seen most recently. You know, probably the first film, you know, had the one I mentioned where you see the reveal where the mom finds out that the doll really is possessed. I love that moment because the doll looks so benign, and after she's like, "I'll throw you in the fire," and then he's like, "You fucking slut!" This goes off on her. Like, I do like that moment.
Because it's just so over the top. It's just like Chucky's acting all gangster.
There's like an odd moment I like in the second one. It's like a kill scene, but it was just creative. So there's the assembly line where the dolls are made, and that one guy falls onto the assembly line, and he gets his eyes popped out, and doll's eyes got popped in place. Like, that's just a weird moment.
That's in part two?
That's in part two. Yeah, I like that. Okay. I like that kill. It was like just kind of wacky.
Right.
As far as stuff I don't like, well, the voodoo element was dumb. I mean, if you know anything about voodoo, like Louisiana voodoo or, you know, Vodou, either one, like it's very goofy, you know, representation of that belief system. So I mean, you know, if I didn't know about that, I probably would.
It works from a movie version, but there was absolutely no research put into it.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, you know, if I didn't know anything about it, I wouldn't really mind, but I might say that's probably my least favorite part about the franchise. It's just that whole thing.
Well, no, I know what you mean. I'm not really a believer of psychic, but I do have friends who that is what they do for a living. They're psychics.
Yeah.
So I think more or less they're awesome at what they do because they have some kind of connection, which is just kind of, whether it's listening to the various noises or making sure other people are at peace, that there's something that makes them tick.
Sure.
And if that's what you got to do in order to sleep at night, do it. I mean, I'm not going to Knowing
Right.
whatever you need as comfort food.
Sure.
But like you say, is like research. What research?
Yeah,
You get an
Just
F.
for pure entertainment is totally fine. In the first film where the voodoo priest or practitioner, I don't know what if in the film even has a proper title, but yeah, like no way would he make a doll of himself. This would not happen. But it's like
Right.
So then Chucky gets a hold of it and like breaks the guy's leg and tortures him. It's like like special effects wise, that's like a cool scene, but it's totally stupid.
I hear ya. Pretty much I just like the last half of the first movie. It's just I like how Chris Sarandon is getting to do some more gunplay, you know.
Oh yeah.
Catherine Hicks is getting to actually do a knife fight with the doll, and again, you actually like the kid because you see him in part 2, and it's like the kid does not want to be there or something. It's just like
yeah, and I know that same actor as an adult is in one of the more recent sequels. I can't remember if it's Curse of Chucky or Call of Chucky, but they bring him back. They bring his character back and the same actor. So I didn't have a chance to watch it. I intended to, just got too busy yesterday. But I am a little intrigued, you know, by how he is as an adult. But yeah.
I know what you mean. I'm sure he embraced it. He probably was, I don't know, not sure what to do because this was before green screen, and it's like, that's what you're doing. You're talking to a puppet that's not really there.
Right. So I do have to say, like, I love Brad Dourif. I love his performances. Like, I can forgive a lot of problems with this series. Just
He really does own the role
Dourif is
because
great.
there's other people who have done voice acting or something, but they never really, they either embraced one or the other or felt like they added the voice, you know, at the last minute.
Right.
And it seemed like they knew, obviously they didn't expect this movie to generate multiple sequels, but at the same time, this is definitely a rarity where the creator has been involved in every installment. And unfortunately, despite lots of people knowing about these movies and, you know, these being really big at convention scenes, it seems like a lot of these actors, especially the kids in part 3 and 4, didn't really seem to do much afterwards, which is weird.
That's too bad.
Because it's not like it killed any careers. If anything, people saw them a lot. Cause, you know,
Sure.
But I don't know. Maybe they didn't want to do acting. I don't know. But
Yeah, maybe they had other interests that they wanted to pursue. So you've met Brad Dourif a number of times, you said.
Just twice. It was one of those, I should have just paid the full bill and just, you know, been part of the lineup. But I don't know. I wanted to actually sit down and like do a Q&A or something with him, and for whatever reason, yeah, that would have been great, but it just was never offered.
Yeah, I met him once. Super, like, one of the nicest celebrities I met. It's just, I'm super embarrassed by it. I think I told you the story on one of your other
briefly, and it was one of those. He was misinterpreting a few things that were being said.
Yeah, like, it's nice he cared. I'm just super embarrassed. So for people who didn't listen to that episode, it was a 2014 Rock and Shock near Boston, Massachusetts.
Lots of shots.
It was Andrew Devoff's debut of his own Gin's Hellebrew beer.
Mm-hmm.
So of course I had to go to that beer pour and try it and all that good stuff. So by day 2, I was completely sleep deprived. I had been wearing these platform high-heeled boots all day and had really bad blisters on my feet. And it got to the point where my feet were swollen up and they were bleeding and I couldn't walk anymore. And sometime after midnight, my friends had also come to the bar to try the Hellebrew. And I got to the point where I couldn't walk anymore. And my friends literally carried me out of the bar. Apparently, It looked like I was completely drunk. I was not. I think I only had 3 beers that whole evening. It wasn't.
It's just that you were sleep deprived, so it just
sleep deprived and couldn't physically couldn't walk because my feet were fucked up. So I didn't think anything of it at the time. The next morning,
That's all
I
everyone's
thought
talking
this is
about.
my chance to see Brad Dourif, because like his line was tremendously long on Friday and Saturday, like wrapping around, like going out the convention hall doors down the hallway, and it's like, yeah, I'm gonna get in line like first thing on Sunday, because it thins out on Sundays at most of these things. So it's my turn to talk to him, and he signs something for me, and I do the photo thing with him. He leans and he puts his hand on my shoulder, and he's like, "Are you okay after last night?" Oh
right.
man, I was so embarrassed.
Yeah.
So then I'm like, I wasn't passing out drunk. I just couldn't walk because my feet were really blistered. I don't know. So he was probably thinking, sure, but I don't know. It was nice he cared. It was just so embarrassing.
It's a crappy story, but at least he didn't, treat you like some of the weirdos he's probably gotten, who are stalking
true.
him. Because you do become accustomed, especially when you get the weekend pass. I'm sure they see the same person who was already there, last year. Or
Probably, yeah. if they have memories of.
I see you Sunday. You were here last Friday, begging to buy all my merchandise.
Yeah, right. So yeah, that was one of my favorite conventions ever. Jeffrey Combs was there too. He's also a super nice guy, but
he really is cool. Because to be the Brian Usna, Stuart Gordon guy, and then again be the Star Trek guy, and then again go back to doing more than just Full Moon and just do all these other just unusual, very emotional performances and voice acting. Is just like all these guys are just badasses. They're just great. And
yeah. So I'm so thrilled I got to meet some of these people. So anyway,
I would love to see. Oh yeah, and I would love to see Yancey Butler from those Link, Placid, and Hard Target movies. But
oh yeah, that would be really cool.
It seems like she's just continually had, been in AA meetings for too long, and it really is sad.
It does give that vibe from some of her characters.
I only know because my boss, Oin at the Action Elite, was actually going to interview her, and she just held him up multiple times, and he was like, and then finally he got a call from her, but it was like her doctor saying she can't talk right now. She's at, a drug rehab meeting.
Oh, okay. I didn't even know. I thought you meant just based on the character she plays. Like,
no.
Literally meant that. Okay, wow.
Yeah. That's why she was on like so many shows and then disappeared for a while.
Yeah. Okay, I see.
But then again, I mean, that is kind of the charm of some of these people. Like, I'm told Bruce Payne is that way, and that makes sense. Mr. B movie. And then I hear other people who I'm surprised have been working mostly behind the camera as opposed to in front of it, like Mario Van Peebles and again, Combs is a good segue. There's a bunch of other people like this who have been in various franchises, and it seemed like Bruce Campbell, after a while he started just saying, unless Sam Raimi's doing it, I'm gonna just stick to doing voice work or something that doesn't require much. I do not want to be in your stupid movie, guys.
Nice.
So I guess this franchise really does benefit from Dourif, Catherine Hicks, and even being less lowbrow than, say, Puppetmaster, but at the same time suffering still a bit from sequel syndrome, and it's a 50-50. Not one person is going to agree on what is the best installment. So this is really hard to review, guys. It really is, because
it's true.
It depends on your mileage. Because I mean, usually everyone else is usually set saying, "Yeah, that movie was just sloppy story, yada yada," or this. And it's like these movies, they're pretty loose with their story. They're pretty much all. If you kind of want something, for lack of a better comparison, like some of the lesser Predator movies or even Warlock, that kind of is horror but not really freaky, but has a little bit of action but isn't really massive overkill on the fighting.
Right. A little campier, maybe.
Yes, absolute bottom camp. Not bottom of the barrel, but just still pretty far from respectable, but still pretty mainstream. Because, I mean, Puppetmaster, you watch those and I can't believe I subbed for all of those. But
Oh, I didn't. You have more stamina than I do. I've
it's
seen it.
okay. I'm not gonna force anyone to do that. But let's just say they keep the more they run out of money, the less the enjoyment occurs.
Oh yeah.
And those were always just wacky based on how the toys were animated and everything. And this, its effects aren't wonky.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of also, I think that's why it benefits. There's not really much CGI unless you get to like some of the recent ones where they're just doing that for the face. If you're fans of the actors,
I'm not a CGI fan myself.
I can't blame you, because CGI is fine when it's really done in a plausible manner. When it just seems like a live action cartoon, it just takes you out of it.
So, I think we cut out. Sorry.
All good. I was just saying CGI when it looks like a live action cartoon takes us out of it, unless there's a reason it's supposed to be that way. And I guess you could say, where would you rank this on the chart of just other franchises of sci-fi fantasy horror?
The whole franchise, at least what I've seen of it, just because some of the later entries really drag it down, I'd probably so you like 5 point. I'd probably give it 2 out of 5.
Oh, good. Yeah.
Ish.
It's kind of where I'm leaning to, because I really found the first one pretty reasonable, but it was hardly, the must-see movie of 1988. There's so many other awesome movies that year, and at the same time, like you say, there are just some outrageousness, but it just takes a while just getting there, or it's like, oh, good God. It's a lot of tracks to cover for one mildly amusing 5-second punchline.
Yeah, sure.
Because like you say, there's some wacky stuff in part 2, but I just couldn't stand how the kid was there. He was constantly in jeopardy, and yet he looked so bored. But at the same time, you root for him killing the evil dad, because,
Sure.
This is nothing more amusing than seeing a terrible person get killed. So.
Right.
And part 3, that dragged too. It didn't make use really of any of its scenery changes, so it was just like, okay.
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to be at an army base camp, you should have had these guys, even bring out the Marines and go all ape shit, try and kill a doll in a hallway or some crazy shit, but they couldn't bother to do that. I could have handled the billionth alien knockoff. I mean, right? Leprechaun did that. Hell. So it's not really all that respectable franchise, yet at the same time, it's goofy. So if you have a bunch of friends and they invite you over to see this movie and you've heard of it, go for it. You might even enjoy it even more because your friend is laughing their ass off and you're still wondering what they see in it. If you don't see that, I mean, obviously you can find these all very easy to find on most of the streaming sites. They almost all, at least one, some of the sequels always play on some of the movie channels or cable. So, I mean, it's really just your time. Fortunately, I sound like I'm trying to be contrarian. I'm not. I'm just trying to... Everyone ranks movies on different scales. Fortunately, these movies do fly by really fast. Mm-hmm. So even when you're not all that engaged, you're hardly bored.
True. You're
more just experiencing something, just saying, well, this is a different kind of mediocre, atypical slugfest than most losing movies. Because, I mean, other movies, what they do bad is they just have people looking around doing nothing, or actors that are wasted cameos. And I can't say that they waste any of their actors or effects. You pretty much get all the money shots that you need here.
True.
And like you say, it's just, I think it's just because the camp just stays at the level it needs to, but at the same time, because it's there's so many Goofy, Killer Doll, and other movies at this point to where it's just kind of seemed like they knew what the franchise was, but they didn't know when to just. They could have played it way safer, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
So with that closing note of this 2-part episode, oh boy, Thursday's going to be special because I'm going to have someone who's like a total Child's Play nerd, so that's going to be interesting.
Interesting.
I'm going to be my most politest. What is My Horrific Life going to probably do next? The blog and podcast site that you run.
Oh gosh, so I honestly have been pretty bad with keeping up with it ever since my mom broke her leg so badly her foot was dangling by flesh. I have been very lukewarm about actually posting reviews on the site. I do need to get back to it.
If I find a screener, I'll send you one.
What's that?
If I find some screeners I think you might like, I'll send them to you.
Yeah, maybe I might be game for that, possibly.
There was this one
but,
British...
Yeah, it's one of these things where I think, oh, this would be a cool movie to review, and then I get busy with other stuff, and then I don't write up the review, so that's been going on. But
Either that or you watch the movie and you're like, ooh.
Right, and I'm also on the House That Screams horror podcast regularly, so that's another
Whoop, whoop.
place where you can find me, so...
Stilling the thunder on every podcast. And Gin's Brew, which you do social media for, is always...
Yes. So, please check out Andrew Devoff's craft beer company, 3marmbrewing.com, and on the social media pages at 3marmbrewing on Instagram.
Hell, we're going to cover actors soon, so I'm going to have to invite you to do an episode on him.
I would love to.
Because, I mean, that'll be special, because it won't just be, movies. It'll be what are his best roles, so...
Yeah, I would enjoy doing that. So
obviously, the
Jen...
Jen...
that episode, definitely.
For sure. I just got to cover... It's just some other cult people, like his buddy Lou Diamond Phillips first, and then...
Yeah. Yeah, they've been in a few movies together, too. Or same projects together, so...
There you go. And speaking of which, his Longmire co-star A. Martinez is in one of the Chuckies that we didn't see all the way, but from what I did see, it seemed like he was pretty good. He didn't have much to do, just play a priest.
That's cool.
So, I think we are to the point where, again, because the convention scenes are so much... On a good day, they're fun. On a lesser day, they're just stressful and very annoying. And basically... You're always going to see these movies promoted there. There's these kinds of movies. It's just people have been watching them, and hopefully we put some retrospect on why certain people cling on to stuff like this. Is it just outrageously dumb, like Friday the 13th? Is it? I think you could say this is kind of like Nightmare on Elm Street. And before anyone throws me under the bus, I'm not saying they're on the same level. I'm just saying they're similar in that everyone varies on which installment is the best.
Right.
And when they stop being freaky, they just start going all into dark comedy fantasy world. So then it's just kind of a matter of, if you don't like anything else on screen, then you're just going for the jokes. If you don't like the jokes, or even... obviously there's not much plot, so then you gotta go for the kills, and if you don't like the kills, do you like the effects? And then if you don't like the effects, then you got nothing, so...
Yeah, that's true.
Hopefully we gave you a different retrospect on it, and anyone who hasn't seen them watches them with caution, and those who swear by them can tell us we're damn wrong and troll us. I don't know. Thank you for being on here. You're a trooper.
Thank you for having me.
Follow us on the web on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. The podcast is available on Podbean, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Anchor, Apple, and anywhere else podcasts are available. Feel free to review our show and leave comments on any of those sites. Thanks a million for listening.
It's a jacked up review show.